Back to Marauder, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
21 gigawatts!
There's something very important I forgot to tell you. What? Don't cross the streams.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I guess I'm doing okay. I'm just so relieved that we finally got an episode with a consciousness in a robot again. You know, I was missing that this whole season, and I know you were looking forward to that too.
This was my fear. I think I might have even mentioned this one. That I was like, I think this one's about a robot with a consciousness in it. It is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This episode, I didn't hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst I've sort of been down on the whole consciousness thing, and you know, in robotic consciousness, and it's the same in this, to be honest, this episode had such a sort of like an 80s kid adventure feel that I was kind of like, all right, I'm going to let some of this go, but overall, some of this is cringe-worthy kind of stuff. What were your initial thoughts on Rachel, Jack? Well, we should actually say we should do the plot in a minute. Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2. So I'll do a quick blurb. A lonely teenager yearns to connect with her favorite pop star, whose charmed existence isn't quite as rosy as it appears. What should I say? It's about two sisters, Rachel and Jack, who live with their father, Kevin, and whose mother has died in recent years. Jack has retreated into the music that her mother used to love, and Rachel is obsessed with a pop sensation called Ashley O, and then becomes fixated on the toy that is produced, Ashley 2, Too. And then they find out that these Ashley 2s have got a consciousness, and hilarity ensues. Let's just stay from there. What were your initial thoughts then, Julian?
I think this episode's fine, but it's wildly uneven.
Yeah,
there are things that are so great in this episode, and there's an awful lot that is, you know, cringeworthy or ill-judged. It's sort of all over the place, right down to it's kind of like Howard the Duck ending with a rock performance that
I'm so
makes
glad
no
you
sense.
said that, because that's exactly where my head went as well. Yes.
Well, we both have tremendous taste, and that's why our brains go there. But I mean, you know, it should be said, like, obviously there's a commentary on, on these pop singers who sort of get managed and whatnot. And we just had this whole thing with Britney Spears, and whatnot. And it should be mentioned that Ashley O is played by Miley Cyrus, who started on Hannah Montana and all of that. And it's sort of shocking that she plays this. She plays the celebrity here. Of course, it makes her look good, right? She's a good guy. And, all of it is a little overdone with sort of like, I want to evolve as an artist, and, you're holding me back kind of stuff. But it does touch on, that sort of thing we've seen. It's hard for me to be really that sympathetic toward unbelievably rich people living glamorous lives who, just don't have the creative freedom that they need to have as artists. Well, not an awful lot of artists who didn't have bread to eat.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. And there's several, as you say, about being ill-judged. This whole thing of like, woe is me. And I'm like, no. fuck is you? Because I'm sort of annoyed by this thing of like, oh, you're a beloved pop sensation and you've got all these merchandise, all these screaming fans. Yeah, but I'm not happy because I've not been able to present the songs I want to present. And you're like, okay, I can understand that. Here's $1 million, mop your tears, because it's quite clear that, like, it's I know it's sort of this thing about an artist, but one of the things it's sort of this might actually annoy a few people, I don't know, but there's something in this that really started to sort of like stick in my craw a little bit about music and the music industry. Because I get that this is all about that music industry and about, you said, about managed bands, created bands, everything from going back from the Spice Girls and those boy bands in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s through to Britney and those sort of pop sensations kind of thing. But there's this thing of, and she makes a really good point because she says about Miley Cyrus character Ashley makes a point at one point about how hard she works. She's like, I do all these appearances, I do all these concerts, and da da da. And so she's working really hard. I'm like, yeah, cool, I get that. And you're being managed, and you make all this money, so like you can retire whenever the frig you want, really, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this downplaying of pop and pop stars, all right? And there's this thing of like, oh, it's not cool to be a pop star. Like, she's kiddie, she's childish, and it's this faux positivity and all this other stuff. Like, you believe in yourself, and the cynicism starts to really piss me off in this episode when she's like, I can do anything if I believe in myself. And I'm like, yeah, how is that like not a positive message? But they're like, it's poison. You can't listen to this thing because, you can't really believe in this shit because it's sort of like, it's rubbish to be this false happy. And at one point, her sister Rachel, the Mr. Jack, who's like into like the Pixies and all this other stuff, and all this older music, and she calls Rachel, her sister, this sort of like, oh, you're into pop. It's just sort of I think she calls it basically sort of like a product, right? Oh, you're just a cardboard cutout of this thing. And she stood there in band merchandise, in a band tour t-shirt for this other band. And I'm like, sorry, you're the same. Everyone who thinks they're alternative and into like alternative music, no, you're doing exactly the same, just for a different genre of music. Like, every metalhead that thinks they are sort of truly hardcore in ripped jeans and a leather jacket and a Slayer t-shirt, cool. Go stand with the other 4 people in leather jackets, ripped jeans, and a Slayer t-shirt. Like, I'm not delegitimizing anyone's taste in music, but just don't turn to somebody else and say that they're any worse than you are. Exactly. Yeah. Just acknowledge that you're all the fucking same.
No, I mean, I have some of the same reaction. And there is this way in which pop is kind of put down. Well, it's sort of like, well, it's a product, right? Well, do you think your heavy metal stuff isn't overproduced?
Yeah.
Do you think that I mean, the issue is money. The issue is any group that has that level of fame and has not successfully resisted, as obviously most kids can't, the sort of, lots of hands in the pie and lots of, cooks in the kitchen. I mean, look, you get these tremendously overproduced and expensive albums but they're really good at what they do. And, it sells for a reason, so, right. I mean, there are groups that don't have that, at least not, that don't have that sort of overproduced, massive, $100 million, spent on an album for them, which really is the case sometimes these days. I mean, that's not the case. Weezer's probably not spending that. They're not selling that anymore. And some groups just don't care. So, I mean, I will say there's a point to what she's making, what Jack is saying there, but it's not exactly what Brooker seems to think, right? There is a kind of equivocation between having a happy message and being a sellout, right?
Yeah.
That I think is potentially dangerous there. But, I do sort of still take a little bit of the point. In as much as the issue isn't really that it's just poppy and happy, it's also that it's just so dumb, right?
Mm.
I mean, it's immediately apparent that its head like a hole, right? I mean, if you're a Nine Inch Nails fan at all, you know all the songs in here, and that happens to be one of my favorite songs of all time. So, so it's immediately apparent, but it's been turned into this like absurdly poppy dumb number. And so that kind of, that's also sort of a satisfying, tricky, interesting element of this.
Well, they do that. Yeah, like they take the song at the end, don't they? This the in the cage song, and like I like the way that they edit it. Like say, because I bet we should really get to the plot, but like there's a moment, and one of the words that's all in the phrase that's used, they're sort of like, "Well, change the pitch," and then they say increase the positivity.
Mm-hmm.
Is like a
That's a
tonal
button.
thing. Yeah,
That's a button.
That was annoying, but it was also kind of
Yeah.
funny that they were like, make it more poppy by being more positive. And I thought that was a funny little moment when I was like, oh, you can take these, and no matter what the lyrics, because no one's fucking listening to the lyrics. As long as the sort of the song sounds happy, they'll go along with it, kind of thing. And I thought that's a nice little nod, a nice little moment then. But
well, and there are groups like this. I mean, one of outside of the sort of Britney Spears kind of, I mean, a key offender. I mean, first of all, let's just acknowledge the Black Eyed Peas are talentless shitheads, and any song they've ever done is an appalling example of everything that's wrong with American culture and a prayer for terrorism against that culture. Not to overstate it, but I mean, there again, it's the sort of like, you hear the beat and people say, "Oh, that's such a great beat," and you read the lyrics and you're like, "What the hell is this saying? This is the worst writing I've ever read in my life." Somebody's making millions of dollars on this, but it's very positive. That is a worse example than the sort of Britney Spears kind of stuff or Miley Cyrus kind of stuff of just kind of like, tonight's going to be a good night. Yeah. Okay. Go lobotomize yourself because, look, I know it's got a beat, but those beats are so big. I'm stepping on leprechauns. That is a real lyric from that song. So look, I mean, Brooker, I probably listens to, different music than I do and thinks that his taste is, supreme and this pop stuff is trivial. But there is a version of that argument that I would buy,
Yeah, but you've got to package it in the right way, and it sort of gets towards it at the end. But I mean, the point of the episode is it's two parallel stories, isn't it? Really. So you have these two sisters, Rachel and Jack, and how they're doing, and the Ashley 2 Furby doll thing is introduced. And it has like it is basically a Furby. Like it has basic responses, and it's sort of like positive affirmations, and it'll help you do things and all this other shit, right? Fine, I'm kind of comfortable with that. Like this feels like the kind of thing you can get now. Like I'm pretty sure you can get like a LOLs doll or something like that. They'll be like, "You're amazing," kind of responses. No problem with that. It's
you go, girl.
Yeah, exactly.
Boys are gross.
Yeah, yeah. You can get these now. I'm 100% sure. Like so I've got no problem with it. But then this thing between the two sisters of how they're dealing with the grief of their mother and stuff. I'm fine. All right, all that seems okay. You got the father who's sort of like just disconnected and trying to kill mice in a which is bizarre.
With a robot mouse.
With the robot mouse, which I kind of find funny, but like,
which was literally called a mouser, right?
Yeah.
It's straight up Baxter Stockman from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I noted that. I thought it was kind of cool. But then in the other thing, you have the sort of the behind the scenes of Ashley O, played by Miley Cyrus, and you find out that she's being controlled by her wicked aunt. and how she's basically this money making machine, and they've got her on meds, and they've got Dr. Monk. I mean, this was totally sort of like, I was like, oh, they're leaning into like all kinds of different stories of like Elvis and Dr. Nick, and then there's like Britney
Michael
Spears,
Jackson,
Michael
and
Jackson, and Britney. I was like,
Prince. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, oh, you are leaning into all these musical things, and then how she's writing this diary of all this evidence, apparently, but it's all sort of tripe, basically. But and so I was like, okay, I get this. I can connect this to real life stories of pop sensations that have been corrupted and managed and kept in a bubble and all this kind of stuff. So I was fine with all that. But then this weird sort of like machinations of like putting her into a coma comes out of nowhere. And then I was like, hang on. No, you've literally talked about how you need her about to make this album. So you're going to stick her in a coma. So one of the reasons I found the consciousness in a robot less egregious is because of how egregious I found this freaking irritating technology of like, she's dreaming songs and we're able to pull them out. And the guy's like, that's a G, that's an A flat, and that's a thingy. And I was like, I was almost smashing my head into the table at that point. I was like, oh my God, this has gone off the deep end of how stupid. Of all the technologies, all the things they've introduced at some point in Black Mirror, like this one, it almost made me choke on what I was drinking at the time. I was like, no, don't. You've put a hat on her and you can read music from her dreams.
You have said it very precisely, my friend. To this I can only add that the interface looks like a brain scan, a two-dimensional brain scan, where you can kind of see different parts of the brain light up, which you can extract into the different notes. So apparently, when you're thinking of like, say, an F sharp, it's right up in your upper lobe, and you can see a neural pattern for that. But if you're thinking about, G flat, well, the G flat is an F sharp. But if you're thinking about, a C, that's in a totally different part of the brain, in a two-dimensional. I mean, it is like,
but not just
Fisher-Price version of
yes, but not just notation, full lyrics too.
Oh yes, right. Well, and there's this stupid, like, it's going to be a problem when it's mentioned early on how she dreams of the songs, right?
I knew it was coming back the moment they said it. I was like, oh no.
It's like, that's your first act gun, except the gun is like a horrible plot development landmine that is going to go off in the writer's face.
To me, this felt like,
and it does.
Yeah. I mean, this, instead of being like Chekhov's gun, this is coming out with someone with a little tub of like bubbles where someone's just going to blow and make bubbles. I'm like, oh, that's your Chekhov's gun? Oh yeah. And you're just like, oh no, this is not going to be good.
Yeah.
So yeah,
no, it's a problem. I mean, yeah, that is horrible. You're totally right. The coma thing comes out of nowhere, and it occurs. I know, but it's a twist. And it comes out of nowhere. So she's O has been caught having not taken her meds, right? Which is why she's, suddenly very goth. I mean, really, this does make the black costume of Spider-Man 3 look totally subtle by comparison. There are two people. Artists have two categories, right? There's bubblegum pop, and then there's hopelessly goth, and there's nothing in between. So she's gone hopelessly goth, because she's been not taking the medicine, and so she's writing disturbing lyrics in her book, and wants to be a real artist. And so
it's so
having found those pills,
but it's so achingly teenager, isn't it?
Yes, but I mean, but it's also like it's worldview, like you were saying earlier about the sort of like take on pop music, and how like somehow the misfits are inherently more more true to themselves than Madonna. Well, it's seems a very loaded evaluations there, and I've liked both groups, but yeah, no, it is very, it's so just so simplistic. And then, well, having discovered your concealed medication, I'm not going to force you to take that medication and resume being the happy person we can market. I'm going to put you in a coma, not knowing that I've got this, it's going to
Technology.
take, like
Yeah.
7 months or something to deploy this hologram technology, which I love. I mean, I that's done really well. It
Yeah,
obviously
the
is
hologram stuff
again,
is good.
yeah, and it's obviously again reminiscent of these like Prince and all these post-death artists.
Tupac and yeah.
Oh God, let Tupac stop making albums already. They weren't that good when he was alive. Um, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's sort of pushing all the music buttons.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So like you said, that we off air before we recorded, before we mentioned like there's a film called Simone, which is very much about this. It's artificially created
Mm,
celebrity with Al Pacino in, and that's what this film this episode sort of gets towards, this idea of the 100% manufactured pop artist that you can control every aspect of, never ages, never gets tired, can go on tour endlessly, blah blah blah. That's the idea. Cool. All right, I like that. You get in there, you're gonna, let's have that argument. It doesn't get there because it ends abruptly but this whole thing with the whole thing with the meds that she's been prescribed by Dr. Monk, who is apparently capable to look at brain scans and tell you all kinds of things. So when he looks at it and says, "This is the creative center," and the moment he said that, I was like, "Oh no!" Like this is a step towards it, and then they do the dream thing. I was just achingly bad. Because the fact that like she's not just not taking her meds, she is collecting them in a small tin. And at some point, I'm just like, "What? Why have you not bin these? Flush them down the toilet, put them down the sink. Why have you got a tin full of them? That is so
so
stupid."
the in-universe justification is that they're evidence, right? That she's planning to kind of like make a move on them,
Yeah.
but they find out, and then they make a move on her first by not medicating her, but instead putting her in a coma. But it seems to me from like she is. Here's another problem with this story. She is clearly disturbed.
Yeah.
She clearly needs some meds. Like these are not like the happy good girl meds, like Alice in Wonderland or something. Like we're medicating you to make you a good girl and conform to
Mm.
gender norms, right? No, she's clearly experiencing major psychological disturbance.
Oh,
She's lost her parents.
she's got
She's
depression. She's suffering
Oh
from
yeah,
like yeah. But
she's not quite hallucinating, but she's got like all the typical Hollywood mental
yeah,
illness symptoms. Other than that, she's writing insane scrawls that look like she's the seven murderer in her
that's
journal.
what I mean. Yeah, when they open the diary and she's like, "That's evidence," and it's like just these big scratch letters. I'm like, "Yeah, evidence of what? That you need to be in a padded cell. This is not good." Um, but also like the evidence would be as well, like if you were to get out of the contract, it's obviously about she has to be 25 to get out of this contract thing and all this other stuff. Fine, there's that. But one of the things I thought was like, well, once you're out, if you do get out of that, then all right, but you don't need the pills as evidence because you could have sourced them from anywhere. What you actually need is you go to your lawyers and you go, right, can you investigate Dr. Monk because he's obtaining these drugs from somewhere. And so he's either got them as a prescription or he's got something. That's the evidence. Sorry, like not you going, I have this mint box full of white pills. Like it's it's almost asinine. Like it's almost like I'm just like rolling my eyes at all this other stuff. But then like you say, the aunt puts her in a coma, like the wicked stepmother she is. And then she's in this coma thing. And then we get the short circuit moment, which is apparently happening in a few other places. Like once there's a woman or sorry, a young girl on TV when the news is written, and she says when my Ashley 2 saw the news of Ashley O going into a coma, she freaked out or it freaked out, and I'm like, oh okay, well, that's coming back. But then I'm like, but then she it has this big freak out. And then they decide to plug it into, and this is again where it's like, I say 80s. This gave me 80s nods because I was like, I always accepted an 80s film because of how stupid that would be. But this is supposed to be something else, and they plug it into
It's set today, right? I mean, it
yeah,
clearly
yeah.
has those 80s vibe. And I thought
But
the van that looks like a mouse, is
yeah,
also a sort of like Stranger Things vibe feel to it. But you're right, it's got this sort of like short circuit thing there.
yeah. Well, they plug it in. They just happen to have a brain technology because of the dad's mouse trapping. I didn't understand that at all. Like that was so sort of like that's so sort of like a bridge. I was like, I don't get this. And then all of a sudden it's got like one little bit in the brain and it expands, and all of a sudden it's the full consciousness of Ashley O in this Ashley 2 thing. And they were like, and the in-world explanation is it
Yes.
was cheaper to do a full brain scan and put on a limiter than to create an AI. Oh,
That's why those Furby dolls are actually replicated girls' brains. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Scott. But I mean, I know that superficially Ashley 2 looks like the technology we have today, but what you don't understand is that it's far easier to scan and replicate people digitally, their entire consciousness.
at
And
least this did not then show inside of Ashley 2 and have a version of Miley Cyrus running around in a black or white room looking out onto the world. Like, thank Christ they didn't do that.
don't forget the Doctor Who does that,
I
in the
know.
Matt Smith stuff. Yeah, I mean, this is bad. That whole plug it in, and then why? Like, if I plug the Furby in, I wouldn't have a representation of a human brain and say, "Oh my, only 5% is being used here." What if I deactivate that? And again, there's no controls over that.
No.
You just do that, and suddenly, the
This
real
software,
Ashley O comes down.
this software we've used for trapping or scanning mice just so happens to be compatible with this Ashley 2 thing. Oh,
And it's really good at depicting human consciousnesses trapped in machines. Right, and disabling controls on those consciousnesses. Yeah. This is and then, this is also a problem because you've seen them like pulp lots of these actually 2 devices. But clearly this is not the only one in existence, right? At the end we sort of see it, around as a kind of robot sidekick, in the Howard the Duck climax.
with an
But
anarchy sign on it, which I thought was
which is fine, but so on
No, it's
everything
kind
is
of cute,
so on
but
the nose,
yeah,
right? Yeah, well, I mean, also let's not forget she's Ashley fucking O now because she's goth and there's no middle ground. And she's singing the real Head Like a Hole in a cover version, which is like, okay, at least that's was an adaptation, and they got Trent Reznor's permission. But again, it's like, yeah, and her old fans leave,
yeah,
because
they're
the real
disgusted.
fans stick with you even when you produce totally different albums. I mean, there's a lot that I kind of can accept about this climax, but just rubs me the wrong way. But clearly, there's a ton of other copies of Ashley's Consciousness out there,
Yeah.
that nobody is concerned about.
Well, this would be one of the things where, like, if I was Ashley O, or even the Ashley 2 doll that now has a full consciousness, that would be one of my. After this is all over, I'd be like, how many more of me are trapped out there? Like, I think am I the only one? But like you say, like, how are they being produced, manufactured, and all this other stuff? Like, if they are manufacturing it, and this is what we said about like the Black Museum thing, like, okay, well, if it's manufactured from something, there's a source version sat in a warehouse somewhere or on a server somewhere. Where's that? Like, this is all ridiculous.
They can make new ones too.
Yeah. So this really does start to annoy me. It goes back to this thing of like, I know it's so stupid, but like I don't know why I'm more willing to let Short Circuit go, but not this. I don't know. Mainly because he got struck by
Well,
lightning. I don't know, but
it's also 80s, and that's kind of controlled in its ridiculousness. Whereas
yeah,
this is, comes later. It's so far off the rails. Um, but then, so the main plot for these girls, I mean, the Jack hides the Ashley 2, and then it's rediscovered and activated, as you say, this most ludicrous fashion, and then it's like cursing, and they're like, Ashley O doesn't talk that way. Well, the real one does, you bitches. It's like, I mean, it's mildly amusing, and then they steal the Mouser car, infiltrate Ashley O's real house, where they sort of convincingly, like, not really, kind of get around
no,
this
no,
guy
no, no, no. You're
Bear,
right.
and then
This is where, right? This is
it
again.
becomes
Sorry.
a caper film, right?
No,
At this
yeah,
point.
it becomes a massively unsuccessful caper film because this is where I was like, oh, if you're going to go for this slightly 80s story, this 80s vibe, like this is where you go. This has now become ridiculous. Lean into the ridiculousness of it. Don't just be like trying to go every time. They've got this character called Bear, who's like the security guard or like the bouncer or the bodyguard or whatever. He needs to be like, he's just this grumpy character, right? Throughout. You need to have some. He needs to be a comedy element to that distraction for him can't be just her going like, "Hey, no, look at this. Oh, I don't know what to do." Like awkwardly. It needs to be like there needs to be some sort of like the easy one is like she says something, he says, "Oh, I'm a fan of that," and then all of a sudden this huge guy is connecting with this young girl over a band or something else, like
Yeah.
and though he's then distracted because they are talking about the Pixies or whatever, some sort of like some old band, and you go, oh, there's more to this character that hasn't been talking much the whole episode. Like that's the joke. That's what it's cliched, it's rote, but it's better than what you get in this, where she's constantly like, is this a regulated toaster, bread bin, and I was just like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah, it's not good. And then she defeats him by throwing the electrified robotic mouse.
Yeah.
And he catches it, which doesn't work that way, right?
No.
It's not been shown that you could just turn this on and use it like a stun gun. I mean, I thought, okay, again, grown. And he catches it, and then she even says something like, I hope he's not dead. We never find that out, by the way. We never
she killed him. Yeah, she killed him.
Yeah.
He had a pacemaker and he shorted it. She shorted it and he's dead. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, quite possibly. Right. And I thought how often cops and security guards wind up killing somebody with stun guns. So then the robot Ashley 2 unplugs the real Ashley O, which is kind of, and says, again, another twist. That was what I intended to do all along, because I'm me, and I wouldn't want to survive like this in a coma, right? Except she's composing music, yeah. I mean, but okay, but that at least is like the image of her unplugging her.
That bit I kind of like. That was one of the
fine.
bits. She like twirls herself in the wire and unplugs the machine. But I kind of like there was an interesting bit. It shows you the screen of the monitors and stuff, and it's at the top of the screen. It says sort of like status controlled.
Yeah,
and I was like,
that's
oh,
not
okay,
on point.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, then you're really trying to hammer this home. And then, but the idea of the robot pulling the plug on the biological original self, I thought was kind of fun. I thought, oh, that's kind of funny. I like that. That's good.
Yeah, and it looks good, and yeah. But then, okay, so far so good. Then, having established that these pills put you into an irretrievable coma, and they have been used for, we both agree, no reason whatsoever. Now, when you pull the plug on somebody, that wakes them up.
Yeah.
Like, what? What is going on now?
Yeah.
Like, this is so far off the rails now.
Yeah. And well, this is it. But then the doctors, because then the Doctor Monk has an alert, so he comes in to find her, and he calls the aunt, and the aunt is like, put her back under. But then he pulls out a syringe, and I'm like, what's in the syringe? Like, this is so sort of like, what's going on? Because then one of the
Coma
sisters,
juice.
what?
Coma juice.
Coma juice. Yeah, that's
Pure coma juice.
it. 50 ml of coma juice stat. Because well, then that gets taken off him, and Rachel stabs him with it, and you get the sort of like he collapses. This would all work better if they were really playing it like some sort of, like you said, some 80s comedy caper, weird science kind of level thing, or do you know what I mean? Like,
but it doesn't start that way. I mean, it starts as a very serious episode.
Yeah.
And it really just migrates into, like over the top, stuff. But you're right. I mean, you're right. It could be more over the top. I think your points about Bear, the henchmen are very well made. But I also think it could start and maintain the same tone.
Yeah,
right?
It should do.
Like, one of the first things you should do is you start your movie with a clear statement of tone so your audience knows what to expect. Like, Top Gun can't turn halfway through into Independence Day.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. This one tonally shifts massively. Like, it starts like this it starts with this story about the dangers of obsessing over an icon, and then shifts into the fact of going, well, if you believe in yourself, you can become that icon's best friend, which is stupid. This should start like an 80s thing. She should be really attractive but wear glasses so everyone thinks she's ugly. She should have a gay friend who's super camp and called Hollywood. All those 80s trappings that we
and wears Hawaiian shirts.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm only joking, not that far. But like you say, it should feel like, I don't know, it just like if you know where you're ending, or even if you wrote it and you end up producing that ending, go back and change the beginning. Well,
this thing, just to retreat a little bit, to an earlier moment, you were mentioning how Brooker is cynical and how he doesn't like the, the happy pop music, but, this, I almost said Alice fucking Ashley fucking at the end, you're a real person when you curse, and in your title.
Fuck
that's how you're fucking legitimate, eh?
Isn't this?
There is this stage performance, right? There is this like considerable time is spent on this, and I have to say I kind of like this. Now, it does not belong in the movie. It does not belong in this episode. There's no reason to prolong this episode with this whole business here, but it's this sort of delightfully Brooker cynicism, where here it's making a point that I think is very important, right? So we were talking about you were mentioning the like believe in yourself kind of thing. Well, the downside of that is this kind of like cult of self-esteem where it's like, I'm going to learn karate. And, by the end of this montage, I'm going to, win the karate championship, right? And, I can be the best singer of all time. And, I'll be a great writer. You can do it. Just believe in yourself. You go, girl. And then she falls on stage and is humiliated. And I really liked that, while it is a sort of cynical Brookerism, that there is this kind of like depiction of, right, not everybody is going to succeed at stuff. And, encouraging people isn't always the right thing to do.
Yes. I'm a bit like I'm looking for a reference, but you're right about not influencing or not encouraging people to an extent, but I think it's about managing expectations. right?
Yes.
So yes, the doll. Jack, the sister, refers to the doll as poison because it's saying like, "You can do it." You know, it's like a little Rob Schneider in the corner. You can do it, sort of like thing. But like, you know, at the beginning, you don't know you can't do it. So it's not saying so Jack's of the world is going like, well, just don't even try. Like, don't even try. And it feels a little bit like that's in the Brooker camp where he's like, well, don't even try because it's just not worth it. It's just, you don't stop being so positive. Yes, but the thing is, it's about the messaging that you come out of this, right? As a parent, and the dad's obviously absentee, and that's again a bit of an 80s trope. But
Yeah.
like the messaging should really be, do you know what? You're right. You're not the greatest dancer. You didn't win the competition. You didn't have flash dance was what I was thinking. Like it's a flash dance moment. Like she comes out and she's like, like, yeah, kind of thing. It should be, you didn't do it. You're right. But you know what? You worked really hard. You got as far. You enjoyed it, doing the training, doing the thing. Brilliant. So well done for that. You stuck with it. Didn't. But you know what? The next thing could be good. Did you, or how about you keep trying, do next year, do whatever. This thing of just don't do anything really sort of, which is what I feel this sort of parts of this story say, is so irritating to me because it's like it's the edge of cynicism into like almost like just self depression where it's just like I'm not doing anything, it's not worth it, I'm no good at it. Well, try, see what happens. Like it's about managing expectations, and that sort of annoyed me a little bit.
But that's the managing expectations. Like, you're not necessarily going to win the tournament, but do it to have fun, do it, the talent show, right? Do it to have fun. I mean, you're right. I mean, of course, you're right about everything you're saying here. I would just say that I did perversely enjoy her not winning the talent show.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It works.
And this message. But you're right that this whole episode really sets up these kind of like false dichotomies between, gross, happy, overproduced pop messages and, angry railing into a microphone, filled with angst. And by the way, really, really terrible thing to say to, artists is that you have to be psychologically unwell to produce, real quality music. I mean, that is one of the most damaging myths we have about, writers and artists in general.
Oh, 100% agree with
way.
Yeah.
And I've been a victim of that. I know so many writers who are just like, right, well, if I go on this pill, I want to kill myself, but if I go on this pill, am I going to be able to write the same? Like, dude, take care of yourself. You do not need to suffer, for your art like this.
It's this weird thing. Suffering, that the suffering artist. And the moment that you become successful, you go from the suffering artist to the sellout. And there is no in between. And there is no sort of like, successful, workaday artist. They're like, no, that you're either struggling with your art or you're a sellout. And you go, okay, well, let's have a word with Prince. Let's have a word with Elton John. Let's have a word with the different varying people and how successful and how they would view their art.
Well, this goes back to like the sorrows of young Werther, right? And this romanticization of, pain and suffering and how that's poetic. That's the real sensitive artistic lifestyle, and you can't be an artist without suffering. But I mean, this is really damaging to people. And to your earlier point about, pity the poor millionaire, singer. I mean, you do know like it's perfectly possible to crank out the hits, which they're going to produce for you anyway, right? Like you have to sing it. Like they'll auto-tune it. I mean, what do you really need to do here? It's so much work. Come on. It's not that much work. It's not that difficult. You have a massive crew to do it for you. You know what? You'll have a lot of free time to work on your angsty, versions. And you can release that, for free on the internet for all the money you got, let that be the hobby, by all means. Well, write your screenplay in your spare time, like all that's ever been asked of you is to sing stupid songs.
The thing, you say about the cynicism though of this and about this idea of the tortured artist and this idea. One of the things I find that I think this episode misses, and let's talk about the industry as it is. she wasn't happy being the pop princess, but the pop princess thing only lasts so long. You got to change, right? And let's look at, say, like Madonna, Cher. There's a couple of others that have, like, they've made little diverts through their career. Like, I think Madonna did it most successfully. Like, she was like, okay, I'm this. Right, well, I'm now aging out of that, so I've got to become something else and something else. And she did it, I think, and I think Cher did it very successfully as well. They're the two off the top of my head I can think about. So you've got that thing of like, well, you haven't got to be this forever. Like, you got transition. But what I will say is they transitioned within, let's say, the pop sphere, right? There was no sort of like, Madonna wasn't like, right, well, tomorrow I'm joining Rage Against the Machine and that's it, So,
well, I mean, there was, like, she shifted to electronic music and back and stuff like that. But right, it wasn't like, well, and Esoteric. I mean, Ray of Light is one of her best albums, and that is like got a much more international electronic feel to it, and very successful because of it. But then shifts back and forth, right? But it's not like I'm angsty, like,
no, it's very much and she had the
killer, better you than me.
That's it. It's within the Madonna brand, and so it sort of works and that sort of thing. But this thing of shifting from one to the other, right? And I would actually say this is more for women than men. All right. So again, there's a bit of sexism going on there, that, like, within the music industry, a pop princess shifting to let's say, she's not metal, let's say she's more rock, right? She's not goth, she's just more like rock kind of thing. You'll get two things. You'll have pissed off your original fans because they will feel that you have abandoned them and invalidated them by saying, I don't do that shit anymore. But also, where you're moving to, you are going to have to prove yourself. And they'll be just like, oh, it's just a tired pop princess playing at being a rock star. She's not real. There's no authenticity here. Do you know what I mean? Like, she would struggle to break that thing. So the end of this, where, like, people are like, yay, woo, you go, and it's all sort of like heavy, it's all rock and stuff. I'm thinking, granted, it's a much smaller arena, but I am thinking, like, this would not have happened. Like, and a better Brooker ending would be that like, she breaks into this, she releases an album, and it dies a death. Where it's like, she does not find an audience because she hasn't broke, that sort of Bandersnatch thing of, like, you get the reviewer going, like, well, she shifted away from her pop roots into this sort of, like, more, gritty rock anthems, but she hasn't quite found her voice yet. It's a 2 from me, kind of thing. Like, that's the reality of, like, it wouldn't be we're all happy, like you say, Howard the Duck ending of things. And I think it would be harder, like, if you were if a guy did that. Vanilla Ice did it.
Oh yeah,
he was shit at both, but
but he was less successful. I mean, he was. I mean, I think it's hard he faced that same challenge of sort of like, right, you're gonna scream into a microphone, ice, baby.
Yeah.
Like, right, nobody's gonna take you seriously, right? You're the guy who made MC Hammer look like a gangster, okay? So
yeah.
I think the difference with gender is that some of the sexual roles and some of the cute innocent girl roles are roles that we don't allow women to continue to have. But in the same way, like, if you're in a boy band, you can't be the cute boy with a waggly hair in your mid-20s or late 20s. There are these roles that kind of people age out of. But I do think that it's hard for, especially somebody a female singer who's seen as sexual or playing the innocent girl, right, which we saw with Miley Cyrus, or playing the sexual dangerous girl, which we saw with what was her name, was suing her parents controlling her.
Britney Spears.
Britney Spears, right? You know,
Mm.
that she played the, more sexual sort of, and
Yes.
she shifted around too. But it's hard in both of those situations to be like, right, I'm the Disney good girl, you know, but now I'm gonna get dirty, and that those are very gendered transitions.
Oh,
Uh,
100%. And that's it. I think it's a hell of a gap. I mean, I would also say, and I don't know, I'm not enough in, but she makes reference to all these sort of female lad rock bands and stuff, and I think there are those there. But to shift into that is hard. And I think to make a name for yourself as a female lead within rock and metal and stuff is very difficult. I would say it's incredibly sort of gendered. And I think I don't know. I think of like Avril Lavigne being an example of something that sort of was trying to bridge that gap with
mm,
of being that sort of like poppy sort of skater rock,
mm,
but it was like,
mhm.
no,
With a
I'm
punk
rock.
edge or something.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
you're not quite pulling this off. Like,
Yeah.
um, I don't know if it, yeah. So it for an ending for an episode that's been incredibly sort of cynical about things, this ending feels almost disingenuous to what they've been doing to date a little bit.
Yeah, it's
Um,
more saccharine,
mm,
yeah, and just as it gets sillier and sillier, it is that Howard the Duck ending, but also the climax of how they defeat the bad guys is that just they drive onto the stage, basically. Like, they drive through the back. It's like, I know the secret entrance, and that leads right to the back of the stage. They're right there, and say, all right, well, she's alive. Um, and but the thing is, the thing that's so surprising to me is that there's a lot that works about this episode, and I don't hate it. We've done nothing but trash it,
yeah.
nothing but mock it, but I it has a kind of charm to it, and it is a train wreck from a
Mm.
structural perspective, from a tonal perspective, um, from a logical perspective. All of these things are
The,
just
the, the,
from a philosophical perspective,
yeah.
it's a train wreck. It doesn't know what it wants to say, but it's kind of, especially. I mean, I would say the most successful stuff is the ending and the sort of over the top,
The second
sort
half,
of 80s caper. Yeah.
the episode breaks into two parts. The moment it's everything pre Ashley 2 coming alive,
Hmm.
and then everything after. Everything before is trying to play a sort of a more serious tone. And it's looking at this idea of adulation of icons and all that sort of stuff. The moment,
And yearning for that connection to them through the
yeah,
Ashley 2, right? Because of your broken lives to fill a void, and right.
it's got a much more sort of like personal, sort of like proper, sort of like darker philosophy. And the moment you have this turn of the aunt being like, ha 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 ha, I've poisoned you, sort of like, and then Ashley 2 comes alive. I'm like, oh my God, this has taken a turn into, like you say, every 80s movie I can think of. Like I said, Short Circuit, Howard the Duck. There's all these sort of like, I'm like, but this is and it's better. It's like you say, it's ridiculous and silly, and well, no, it's not. It's not ridiculous enough. It's not silly enough. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
Brooker hasn't got the guts to go all out because it's so against what I think the rest of the ethos of the show has been. When really this should have been the um, I'm doing an all out 80s comedy caper episode.
I think this episode, in that sense, tries to have it both ways. And I
Yeah.
think that if we, just to wrap up, if we think about the fifth season as sort of Brooker breaking the mold, right?
Mm.
I mean, you have the two, British series, and then you have the two seasons of, the American seasons, and then it's like, okay, I mean, I've got, obviously Bandersnatch is doing that, right? It's doing a totally different format,
Yeah.
right? Here we have, and then in season 5 proper, we have, um, the, the episode that has minimal technology is telling a love story, but where the characters aren't messed up at the end, like, the characters are like oddly mature, and it's a
Yeah.
sort of like weirdly controlled narrative with minimal technology. And then you have this second, episode that is sort of very realistic. Again, minimal technology, almost a police thriller, more than a typical episode. And sort of, I can do this. And this is the sort of like 80s caper. But the difference is here, Brooker kind of, I'm just hypothesizing, but Brooker kind of just can't restrain that earlier parts, right? And having those parts come out and sort of having it both ways. And so instead of fully committing to the, sort of like 80s caper, sort of short circuit, like, there's this commentary stuff there, and it's not that it's bad, it just doesn't belong in the same movie.
But you could do everything you do in the first half, and you could do all the same, but you've just got to slightly change your tone and your approach to be ready for that second half. And I just don't think he has the writing chops to manage that. And also, as it translates onto screen, I just think they were a bit like, oh, we know what Black Mirror is. Black Mirror is like this. And then when they make it, they're like, oh, this feels different. Like, this is not working. And what I kind of feel bad about is, like, as you said, there's a charm to this. Like, I actually like the design. I think, Miley Cyrus is actually kind of good in this. This is one of the episodes where I'm like, this is a missed opportunity for something really fun. Like, they could have done a really dark sort of comedy satire, and had a lot of fun doing it. I mean, the idea, just the concept of a robot version of yourself finding out that you're in a coma and then plotting to kill you as a mercy killing. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like that would have been, there's so much there that I'm like, that's cool. Like, it's a good little, that's probably one of my favorite moments is when the realization of what's going on. But
let's imagine, I mean, if we've said we like the caper part better, and I don't know that it needs to go in this direction, but let's imagine a different version where the Ashley 2 is put upstairs for 10 years. And all the other Ashley 2s known to exist are basically pulped. And because nobody's paying attention, nobody knows that it's up in the attic, except for Jack, it somehow magically escaped. And so when it's brought online and it becomes sentient or whatever, it's 10 years into her likeness being exploited in the hologram. And I love the hologram adjustable, it's scalable.
I love that.
Joke,
yeah.
But because it can grow, but it's also scalable because you can project this around the world. And I love this idea of like a world tour that all happens at the same day. And this idea of sort of, unlike how frustrating it is that a consciousness can be replicated ad infinitum, and Brooker never seems to have fully thought that out. This idea of the hologram being replicated works brilliantly, and the idea of being able to fully commercialize this. So imagine if the Ashley 2 wakes up and it's 10 years later, those girls are older now, and her likeness has been exploited mercilessly, in just the most cynical of ways. And her real body has been in a coma for 10 years. Not presumably not producing music, but, and then her agenda as Ashley 2 is, right, I've got to kill my real body and I've got to end this exploitation. It does seem like there is a cynical thing here that would work about how we exploit our celebrities. I mean, you can imagine she turns on the TV and you hear, the McDonald's, commercial using her song and all this kind of stuff. And like, I wrote that song about feeling suicidal. Like, like, what is this doing on,
They're using part of the chorus of an anti-capitalism song to represent McDonald's or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there is a kernel here of
Mm.
something that's really, really cool and need not be that sort of farcical 80s thing that is successful, but it sort of doesn't commit to either one.
No, I mean, you could have almost like a Verhoeven-esque full satire if you wanted to go that far, which I think would be great. But yeah, like you say, but even if you didn't go that far, and I like this idea of it waking up like 10 years later, and coming out and finding a very different world and then, like I say, being struck by lightning or being, for whatever purpose, is able to sort of remove its limiters. Or even the next generation, like Rachel's daughter finds it in the attic, and like I say, it's a generation later of like, oh, you're like Barbie now, like, you're just this, as you say, just ubiquitous across everything. A bit like, oh, there was this Waldo thing, but that didn't really stick, so we've now got the Ashley Eternal model. So yeah, you could do all that, but even if you stick with the caper version, like I said, I think you just turn it. Like I say, it's 2 or 3. Well, it's like 10 degrees off being what I think it should be, and I think Howard the Duck, or like those 80s things I said, like, or even like, Short Circuit, or even like E.T., those sort of like ideas. It should be going like lean into that. Like, you've got a van that looks like a mouse. Like, the last film to do something like that was Dumb and Dumber. Like, you're clearly making choices here that you think are funny, but then you've got to have the fun with the funny. Don't just go, we want a van that looks like a mouse, and then it's going to be really somber about everything else. Like, I don't know. It's just, this one is a real miss in that front. Like, it's a real shame that this is a miss, because there is a charm to it, as you say, but it just, it's not quite there.
Yeah, but again, I don't hate this episode. Like, I think this is a fine episode. I think it's perfectly adequate. It's better than a meh. It's got a bunch of ideas. It's got, a bunch of kind of like amazing stuff with a hologram and Miley Cyrus. I do find myself thinking of the Family Guy episode with Miley Cyrus, where somebody else plays her, but where they discover that Miley Cyrus is in fact a robot that's being cynically exploited by her commercial masters, and then the robot goes awry. But no, I mean, there's a lot here that's good and that is interesting, even if it all doesn't fit together in an episode.
Oh, it is. It's good. It's got some interesting ideas. It's just I often, as I say, I think sometimes my annoyance with episodes is actually from disappointment when I'm looking at something and going like, this could have been a couple of notches to the left, and this could have been really good. You should have just, grown some balls and gone for it a little bit with this one. I think it'd have been really entertaining. But yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, that is the end of season 5. We're 1 season away from completing our Black Mirror run, which is the most recent season left. And so on the next episode, we'll be jumping into that with Joan is Awful, which is, again, they've sort of, it's a different side. It feels like a different direction again. I've sort of seen some of the trailers for the latest ones. Much like Madonna changing back and forth, this series is changing back and forth to its tone. This feels a lot the 6 feels a lot closer to 3 and 4 in that sort of the way they've approached it. So we'll see. We shall see what is in there, and how many of them are consciousnesses hidden inside a computer and telling a story. Hopefully none of them. But this is Charlie Brooker, and I'm assuming there's at least one, so we shall see.
Yeah.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for staying with us through season 5. We appreciate it. And if you enjoy what we're doing, come and find us. Let us know, are we miles off on this episode? Or did you enjoy it? Should it be more 80s caperish or not? at Pod Time Space on X, and under 20th Century Geek in all other platforms. But also leave us a review. Find us on Stories Under Time and Space and just leave us a review on your podcast catcher, and check out our Patreon for a whole bunch more of other bonus material. But for now, thank you, Julian. It's been a fantastic episode. It's
been great. You're talking to my hologram right now.
I wish we could do holograms. I want to. It's a whole different episode, but I really want to have a hologram where I can just project. If I could send one to work for me, that would be amazing. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we shall see you on the next episode.